Most people don't fail because they are stupid or lazy. They fail because their life is unmanaged and nobody ever taught them how to sit down, look at themselves honestly, and make quiet adjustments before things fall apart. And if you're watching this right now, there's a good chance you feel busy but not productive, tired but not fulfilled. And you can't explain why, because on the surface, you're trying, you're thinking, you're hoping, yet something still feels off, like your life is moving but not going anywhere. And that feeling doesn't come from lack of talent or opportunity. It comes from lack of self-management. Because when you don't manage yourself, everything else slowly starts managing you. Your time controls you, your emotions control you, your phone controls you, your environment controls you. And before you realize it, you're reacting to life instead of directing it. This video is not here to hype you up. It's not here to shout at you. And it's not here to sell you false confidence. It's here to help you sit with yourself calmly and understand something most people never slow down enough to learn, that the quality of your life is directly connected to how well you manage and evaluate yourself. Not occasionally, not when things go wrong, but daily, quietly, and honestly. Because if you can't manage yourself when nobody is watching, you won't manage success when it arrives. And that's why so many people dream of change, but collapse when responsibility shows up. Think about this carefully. If someone handed you a business without teaching you management, it would fail. If someone gave you money without teaching you discipline, it would disappear. Yet somehow we expect life to work out while never learning how to manage the most important system of all: ourselves, our thoughts, our habits, our energy, our reactions. And that's not your fault. Nobody taught you this. But now that you're aware, responsibility quietly shifts into your hands, not as pressure, but as power. Self-management is not about controlling every second of your day. It's not about becoming rigid or perfect. It's about awareness before action, evaluation before emotion, and intention before habit. Because once you start noticing patterns instead of judging yourself, things begin to change naturally. You stop asking why your life feels chaotic, and you start seeing exactly where the chaos enters. Through how you spend your mornings, how you react under stress, how you avoid uncomfortable tasks, how you talk to yourself when things don't go your way. And once you see these things clearly, you can't unsee them, and that's when real growth begins, quietly, without noise, without announcement. Most people live their entire lives without ever evaluating themselves honestly. They evaluate others, they evaluate circumstances, they evaluate luck and timing, but they never sit down and ask simple questions like, where does my time actually go? What drains my energy the most? What patterns keep repeating in my life? Why do I promise myself things and fail to follow through? And these questions are uncomfortable, not because they're hard, but because they require honesty. And honesty removes excuses, but it also gives clarity. And clarity is what most people are truly missing. If you stay with this video, not in a rush, not multitasking, but actually listening, you'll start seeing yourself more clearly than you have in a long time. And once you see yourself clearly, managing your life stops feeling overwhelming and starts feeling possible. Because you can't fix what you refuse to evaluate, and you can't grow what you don't understand. This is not about becoming someone else. It's about finally understanding the person you already are, so you can manage yourself with intention, instead of letting life drag you forward by force. Why most people feel stuck even when they're trying. Most people don't feel stuck because they're not moving. They feel stuck because their effort is scattered, unfocused, and constantly reacting to whatever feels urgent in the moment. And when effort has no direction, it creates exhaustion without progress, which is one of the most dangerous states a person can live in, because it slowly convinces you that trying doesn't work, when in reality, it's the way you're trying that needs correction, not your ability or your will. When you wake up without a clear plan for your energy, not your time, but your energy, the day decides for you what deserves attention. Notifications pull you, emotions interrupt you. Small distractions eat hours. And by the time the day ends, you feel busy yet disappointed, tired yet unsatisfied. And this cycle repeats so often that it starts feeling normal. And once chaos feels normal, clarity feels uncomfortable. Which is why many people avoid slowing down to evaluate themselves, because slowing down would force them to see patterns they've been running from. Another reason people feel stuck is because they confuse motion with progress. They do many things, but rarely the right things. They start tasks, but don't finish them. They consume information, but don't apply it. They feel motivated, and over time, this creates a quiet frustration that sounds like, I'm doing everything, but nothing is changing. And that thought is heavy because it makes you question your worth, when the real issue is not your worth, but your system, or more accurately, the absence of one. There is also the emotional side that nobody likes to admit. Unmanaged emotions quietly sabotage consistency. When stress hits you, abandon routines. When boredom hits you, scroll. When fear appears, you delay. And when disappointment shows up, you retreat into comfort. And without self-evaluation, these emotional reactions feel justified. But once you start observing yourself instead of identifying with every feeling, you realize that emotions are information, not commands. And learning to manage yourself means learning when to listen to emotion and when to override it calmly. Many people are also stuck because they're living based on pressure instead of principles. They act when fear pushes them. They stop when comfort pulls them. And their life becomes a series of reactions instead of intentional choices. And reacting feels easier in the moment. But over time, it removes your sense of control. Because when life happens to you, instead of being directed by you, confidence slowly erodes, not suddenly, but gradually, day by day, until you forget what it feels like to trust yourself. If you're honest, you might notice that you already know what you should be doing. But knowledge without evaluation leads nowhere. Because knowing without tracking turns into self-deception. And this is where self-evaluation changes everything. Not by judging you, but by showing you the gap between intention and action. And once that gap becomes visible, improvement becomes possible, not through motivation, but through awareness. Stuck doesn't mean broken. Stuck means unmanaged. And unmanaged things don't fix themselves with time. They fix themselves with attention, calm attention, honest attention. The kind that looks at reality without panic and says, this is where I am. This is what I'm doing, and this is what needs to change first. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. If this part is making you uncomfortable, that's a good sign. Discomfort here means awareness is waking up, and awareness is the first real step toward managing yourself instead of feeling managed by life. What self-management actually means and what it doesn't. Self-management is often misunderstood because people confuse it with strict schedules, extreme discipline, or turning yourself into a machine. But real self-management is much quieter than that. It's not about controlling every minute of your day. It's about understanding how you naturally function and then working with yourself instead of constantly fighting yourself, because when you fight yourself, you waste energy. And wasted energy is one of the biggest reasons people feel drained, even when they're not doing much. Self-management does not mean waking up at 5 in the morning if your body is exhausted. It does not mean forcing productivity when your mind is overwhelmed. And it does not mean copying someone else's routine and feeling like a failure when it doesn't fit your life. Because management without self-awareness turns into punishment. And punishment never creates consistency. It only creates resistance. What self-management actually means is paying attention before reacting. Noticing how you spend your time, how you lose your focus, how you respond to stress, how you treat yourself after a mistake. And instead of judging these patterns, you observe them calmly, because observation creates space, and space gives you choice. And choice is where control quietly begins. Managing yourself means knowing when you work best, not when you wish you worked best. It means understanding which environments help you focus and which ones drain you. It means recognizing which habits give you energy and which ones steal it. And once you see these things clearly, you stop relying on motivation and start relying on design. Because motivation comes and goes, but systems quietly stay. It also means learning to manage your internal world, your thoughts, your expectations, your emotional reactions. Because if your inner world is chaotic, no amount of external structure will save you. And this is why people can change jobs, cities, or routines and still feel lost, because they moved the environment but never managed the person inside it. Self-management is also about setting limits. Limits on distractions, limits on people who drain you, and limits on the stories you tell yourself. Because without limits, everything demands your attention. And when everything feels important, nothing actually moves forward, and your life stays busy but directionless. And here's something important that rarely gets said. Self-management is not about doing more. It's about doing less, but with intention. It's about choosing one or two priorities and protecting them consistently. Because focus is fragile, and unmanaged focus disappears without you noticing. Once you understand this, self-management stops feeling heavy and starts feeling relieving. Because instead of constantly asking, what should I be doing with my life? You start asking simpler questions, like what deserves my energy today? What can I do consistently without burning out? And what small adjustment would make tomorrow slightly easier than today? And those questions, when asked daily, quietly change the direction of your life. If you're still listening, you're already doing something most people avoid. You're slowing down to understand yourself. And that alone puts you ahead, not loudly, not dramatically, but meaningfully. How to evaluate yourself honestly without shame or denial. Most people avoid self-evaluation because they think it means criticizing themselves, reliving mistakes, or facing uncomfortable truths they're not ready to deal with. But real evaluation is not about punishment, it's about clarity. And clarity is gentle when you stop resisting it, because you're not trying to prove anything. You're just trying to understand what's actually happening in your life. To evaluate yourself honestly, you first have to remove emotion from observation, not by becoming cold, but by becoming curious. Because curiosity asks questions without blame, and blame shuts growth down immediately. So instead of saying, why am I like this? You begin asking, when does this happen? Instead of saying, I'm lazy, you ask, what situation makes me avoid action? And these small changes in language completely change how safe it feels to look at yourself truthfully. One of the simplest ways to start evaluating yourself is to look at patterns instead of moments. One bad day doesn't define you. One good day doesn't either. Patterns are where the truth lives. Patterns in how you start your mornings, patterns in how you respond to pressure, patterns in what you do when nobody is telling you what to do. And when you start noticing patterns, excuses slowly disappear on their own, not because you force them out, but because reality becomes visible. Another important part of evaluation is learning to separate effort from results. Because many people work hard but in the wrong direction and without evaluation. Effort feels like progress even when nothing is improving, so you begin asking simple, uncomfortable but powerful questions like, what did I do consistently this week? What did I avoid? What drained my energy the most? And what gave me the least return? And these questions don't require motivation. They require honesty, and honesty is always available. You also need to evaluate how you talk to yourself, because internal dialogue quietly shapes behavior. If every mistake becomes proof that you're not good enough, you'll naturally avoid effort. But if mistakes become information, you'll stay engaged, and self-management becomes sustainable. So evaluation is not just about actions. It's about the story you attach to those actions. It's also important to evaluate your environment, because environment often explains behavior better than character. If you're constantly distracted, ask what's around you. If you lack energy, ask how you're sleeping, eating, and resting. If you keep delaying important tasks, ask what fear is attached to them. And when you adjust environment instead of attacking yourself, progress feels lighter and more consistent. Honest self-evaluation doesn't happen once. It happens regularly, briefly, and calmly. A few minutes at the end of the day or week, not to judge yourself, but to correct. Because small corrections done often prevent big breakdowns later. And this is how people slowly build stable lives without dramatic turning points. If you're listening closely, you might realize that nothing here is extreme or complicated. It's simple, but simple things require presence, and presence is something most people never practice. And that's why those who do quietly outperform those who don't. Fixing one area at a time without overwhelm or burnout. One of the biggest mistakes people make after gaining awareness is trying to fix everything immediately. They see all their flaws at once and turn clarity into pressure. And pressure quickly turns growth into burnout. Because self-management is not about sudden transformation. It's about steady alignment. And alignment happens best when you focus on one area at a time. When your life feels out of control, it's rarely because everything is broken. It's usually because one or two areas are unmanaged and quietly affecting everything else. Maybe it's your sleep, maybe it's how you start your mornings, maybe it's how you handle distractions, or maybe it's how you manage your emotions under stress. And instead of attacking all of it, you choose the area that creates the most damage if left unchecked. Because fixing the biggest leak stabilizes the system. To choose what to work on first, you don't ask, what do I want to improve? You ask, what is currently costing me the most? Costing me time, energy, focus, or peace? And whatever comes to mind first is usually the right place to start. Because awareness tends to highlight the truth before excuses have time to interfere. Once you choose one area, the goal is not perfection. The goal is consistency. Small actions done repeatedly beat big actions done once. So instead of designing a perfect routine, you design something simple enough that you can maintain it even on low energy days. Because self-management that only works when you feel motivated is not management, it's dependence. Fixing one area also means setting boundaries, not dramatic ones, but quiet ones, like deciding when your phone stays away, when work ends, when rest begins, and when certain behaviors are no longer negotiated, because boundaries protect energy, and protected energy allows progress to continue without force. As you stabilize one area, you don't rush to the next. You let stability settle in. You let the new normal become familiar, and only then do you move forward. Because stacking stability is how people build strong lives, not through sudden changes, but through patient, intentional adjustments that compound over time. This approach also rebuilds trust with yourself. Every time you keep a small promise, your confidence grows quietly, not loudly, not through hype, but through evidence. And confidence built on evidence lasts, because it doesn't depend on mood or external validation. If you felt overwhelmed by self-improvement before, it wasn't because you were incapable. It was because you were trying to carry too much at once. And learning to manage yourself means learning to move at a pace your life can sustain, not a pace that looks impressive from the outside. Mental strength, consistency, and staying when it gets boring. Most people don't fail because they can't start. They fail because they can't stay. They begin with energy, excitement, and hope. But once progress slows down and results stop being visible, they assume something is wrong, when in reality, this quiet phase is exactly where consistency is being tested. Not your talent, not your intelligence, but your ability to keep showing up without emotional reward. Mental strength is not about being intense or aggressive with yourself. It's about staying calm when nothing seems to be happening. It's about trusting the process when the feedback is delayed. And it's about understanding that boredom is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that your mind is no longer being entertained and is now being trained. And training never feels exciting in the moment. It feels repetitive, slow, and sometimes pointless, until one day it doesn't. Consistency becomes difficult when your identity is tied to motivation. because motivation rises and falls, but identity stays. So instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this today?" you begin asking, "Is this the kind of person I'm choosing to be?" And that shift removes negotiation, not harshly, but quietly, because you stop depending on feelings to decide your actions. Another reason people quit during the boring phase is because they constantly look for signs that it's working. They check numbers, reactions, validation, and when they don't see immediate confirmation, doubt grows, and doubt drains energy. But those who understand self-management learn to measure progress differently. They look at behavior instead of outcomes. They ask, "Did I show up? Did I keep the habit? Did I follow through?" Because behavior is the only thing you fully control. Staying consistent also requires managing your expectations. Many people expect progress to feel good every day, but real progress often feels neutral, sometimes uncomfortable, and occasionally discouraging. And if you're not prepared for those emotional states, you'll interpret them as failure, when they are simply part of the process. Mental strength is built when you continue even on ordinary days. Days without inspiration, days without clarity, days without visible improvement, because those days are quietly shaping your discipline. And discipline is what carries you forward when motivation disappears. If you've ever wondered why some people seem unshakable, it's not because they're special. It's because they've learned how to stay present through boredom, uncertainty, and slow growth without making it mean something negative about themselves. If you're still here listening, you're already practicing this skill, staying, listening, reflecting, and that matters more than you realize. If you take anything from this video, let it be this simple understanding that your life does not need more intensity. It needs more awareness, because awareness brings choice, and choice brings control, and control, when used calmly, creates stability, not overnight change, not dramatic transformation, but a steady sense that you are no longer drifting. Managing yourself is not about fixing who you are. It's about finally understanding who you are, how you function, what drains you, what strengthens you, and what patterns quietly shape your days. And when you manage those patterns intentionally, life stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling navigable, even when circumstances are hard. Evaluating yourself honestly is not an act of self-judgment. It's an act of self-respect, because you're willing to look at your reality without denial and without shame. And from that place, real change becomes possible, not forced, not rushed, but sustained. You don't need to control everything. You only need to manage what you can influence: your time, your attention, your reactions, your habits, and your expectations. And when those are managed well, the rest of life becomes easier to handle. Not because it's perfect, but because you are grounded. If you felt overwhelmed, lost, or behind, let this be a reminder that you're not broken. You were just never taught how to manage yourself. And learning this skill is not a race, it's a lifelong practice, one that rewards patience more than speed. Start small, evaluate calmly, adjust gently, and stay consistent even when it feels ordinary. Because ordinary days are where real progress is built, quietly, without applause. If you stay present with yourself, if you manage your inner world before trying to control the outer one, you'll slowly notice something change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. You'll feel more in control, more aligned, and more capable of directing your life with intention. And that is how real change begins.